Hey guys, how's it going? It's been a while since I've done a full concept behind the servants, so I figured it was about high time I went back and revisited it. Today's topic is maybe one of the most confusing and loose concepts for classification in Fate, the Pretender class. Being a class that is relatively new, being just over 2 years old, the rules as to what allows a servant to manifest as a Pretender are more than a bit odd and mysterious. There is a clear set rule as to who can take on this guise, but we will see fairly quickly that this rule is easily bent and manipulated. So, let's dive into what exactly the Pretender class is, and why those who are the members of it are qualified. The Pretender class is made up of imposters, people who have donned the guise of another and completed deeds in the name of that person that are then attributed to the person they are posing as. People who, in essence, struck their own names away from history in favor of living in the form of another, continuing their host's legacy while sacrificing their own. Through this process, they have essentially swindled the world, marking their beings into history without assigning their own name. Now, it is noted that if you are posing as an alter ego of yourself and not a different person entirely, you do not qualify for the class. Here's a really nerdy comparison, but it works. Bruce Wayne couldn't be a Pretender class servant because Batman is his own alter ego. However, if Superman died and Bruce Wayne disguised himself as Superman and did actions as Superman and fools others into believing that he was Superman and no one knew the real Superman had died, then he would qualify as a Pretender. The important aspect is that you are pretending to be somebody else and are able to convince others of this fact. At the very least, that's how it's meant to be. The other way to become a Pretender is through altering an existing servant Saint Graph, which we have at the time of writing this scene only happened 3 times, with Little Liz, Proto Merlin, and Summer Bob. Each of these servants, however, does offer an explanation as to how they still qualify for the class, which we will get into right now. So let's get started. I'm going to start by giving a fairly obvious spoiler warning, especially for all characters on this list. When the nature of the class has to do with hiding what their true name is, it is almost certainly relevant to the story, so if you care about avoiding those spoilers, you can revisit this video later. Our first and arguably best Pretender is the man, the myth, the moth, Oberon. Oberon historically has 2 different figures, a dwarf-like figure in the French tales of Le Procès et Fête du Noble Juan de Bordeaux, where he assists the titular Juan in negotiating a pardon after a kindly greeting. More famously, he is the king of the fairies in Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream, where he serves as a near all-powerful being with his wife, Titania, and influences the events of the play to move in his favor. This guise as the king of the fairies with no shortage of charm and looks is befitting how Oberon appears in his first 2 ascensions, a good-natured and well-meaning fairy who demands the respect of those around him due to his rank and ability, but is more likely to meet you with a smile than anything else. In actuality, he is the tyrant king of England before the rule of Uther, Vortigern. Vortigern was a usurper and bringer of calamities to the Isle of Britain, most notably being the one who inadvertently started the invasion of the Saxons, Angles, and Picts by inviting them to English shores. He was predicted to be defeated by a rightful and just ruler and inevitably fell to the hands of Uther. Now, the obvious question then is, how are Oberon, the king of the Fae, and Vortigern, the usurper king, related? The historical answer to this is that they're not. However, fate devised a way to connect them within the plot of Lost Belt 6. Vortigern is akin to a panic button for the world and the Isle of Britain. If Britain becomes a place where humanity can no longer flourish, the world summons Vortigern to purge the land so it can start again. However, the world has manifested Vortigern a handful of times over the 2,000 years that Morgan was ruler, and Morgan has defeated them every single time. So, during his current incarnation, the world manifested him differently. Using the Saint Graph of the servant Oberon, the world manifested Vortigern within it in a process similar to a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. He lay in the chrysalid form of Oberon, unable to move for months upon months before eventually being able to do anything. With the outward appearance of a normal fairy, and the ability to lie and deceive anyone he talked to, Oberon made it his mission to eliminate the one threat that he had: Morgan. To this end, Oberon succeeded and was able to hide his true intentions and identity from everyone, allowing him to be a Pretender. Something interesting that I found is that there is no dedicated class passive to the Pretender class. This is somewhat odd given the fact that almost every other class has at least one dedicated class passive. That said, most Pretenders have pretty strong passives regardless, so maybe that's just the trade-off there. Our next Pretender is Hephaestion. The historical Hephaestion was a man who served as the right hand to Alexander the Great up until his death by Bad Chicken. Once again, historically Hephaestion was just Hephaestion and no more. In Fate, however, the character that we summon that goes by the name Hephaestion is somebody else. The difficulty here is that this is someone who has no name and was neglected one for a reason. The Mystery Woman is the twin sister of Hephaestion, and where her brother was to act as the right hand to Alexander, she was to be his shadow. From birth, she was trained towards this end and taught magecraft. One of her most important abilities was to be able to take the guise of Iskander and absorb curses that may be cast upon the coming king of conquerors. On these grounds alone, being someone who took the form of another to assist them should be enough to allow her to manifest as a pretender. However, the most fitting class for her naturally is as a caster. The reasoning as to why she is able to manifest as a pretender in FGO comes down to a part of the Mnemosyne system, merging with her Saint Graph. That is the given in-game explanation. You may recall the Mnemosyne system being the massive robot that was fused with the body of Da Vinci in the Case Files event. The Mnemosyne system's purpose, much like Da Vinci's during our race shifts, was to continually verify our existence over the course of the journey so we weren't immediately removed. For what reason this, over her actual ability to take others' forms, is what takes precedence over her being a pretender is beyond me. Lady Avalon, aka Proto-Merlin, is a rather unusual member of this class. She falls into the classification of having her Saint Graph altered because of the summer, this being a catch-all excuse for any summer servant class change. Naturally, she is meant to be a caster class servant, but has appeared in Chaldea as a pretender regardless. We also know Merlin already, but if you somehow are unaware of the most famous wizard in history, he served as the court wizard to King Arthur and was a half-man, half-incubus, and as such was incredibly powerful. He orchestrated many of the major events of the Arthurian legend in an attempt to save England from tyranny, but then got really horny and turned into a tree. Now, we have male Merlin, the affectionately called Cock Wizard. Proto-Merlin originates from a different timeline than our own, much in the same way that Arthur does. But is there anything that may indicate her being an actual imposter? We can discern from her character profile that we are completely unaware of who she really is. Let me rephrase that. We know that she's actually Merlin, or at least a Merlin. That much is clear. But the fact that she responds to this by just smiling at us is unusual. She acknowledges Merlin as her older brother, which is probably more of a gag thing than anything else, but then we get to the fact that not just she, but both Merlins are beast candidates. This is not anything new to know about Merlin, as it is the reason why he isolates himself so far away from humanity and maintains his distance, because if he comes to love humanity like he wants to, he will become a beast. He actively acknowledges this and restrains himself, believe it or not. It is stated that in the case of Proto-Merlin, she has put up no such restraint. She is referred to by a current beast candidate, Beast666, as being the beast of the planet in the arcade story. So it is well within the realm of possibility that she is already a beast pretending to be normal, which will inevitably give her an alternate form in the near future that we have to defeat. Or, you know, something like that. From surprisingly serious to not serious at all, we have our first welfare pretender, Nine Dragon Tattoo Eliza, aka Liz. This Halloween event shows the birth of a new Liz, this time with a new Chinese motif and unique horns. I'm going to be honest with all of you. This is the most gag character and no explanation one that we have for this list. I played through this event translated on JP, and remember the story being that several Liz's fused with one another and created this rendition of Liz, and the actual servant that is summoned is Shi Jin, who is a character from the Water Margin. It is because of his influence altering her Saint Graph that she was able to manifest as a pretender. Shi Jin himself was a powerful fighter in the Water Margin and showed a good deal of honor even when he was forced to become a bandit. He has no legends of him impersonating others, but through the virtue of acting as a guide for Elizabeth, he is using her as a proxy, which allows her for the class change. Tlaloc is the Aztec god of rain and originally the third sun. He was a widely worshipped deity and is still worshipped in some sects today for his ability to bring water to crops. He was one of the most important deities of the Aztec pantheon and was honored through child sacrifice. That is not who this is. In actuality, this is the Aztec god Huitzpactli, a war god and equally as important deity to the Aztecs. One of the most famous anecdotes of Huitzpactli was ordering the Aztec people to move from their native home, known as Aztlan, to the south. They were originally believed to have lived in the southwestern United States, but then uprooted their entire civilization and moved until they reached Lake Texcoco. During their journey, they had supposedly spurned another god for her poor ruling, and she gave birth to a monstrous deity called Copal, who Huitzpactli defeated. He then removed its heart and threw it into Lake Texcoco. Eventually, he stopped the march and ordered his people to build their city upon the heart, and they would be able to identify it because they would find an eagle eating a sacred serpent on a cactus. They found the very spot and founded their city, and from then on they were called Mexica rather than Aztec. But I have lied to you yet again because the pretender we summon is neither of these deities. Rather, she is the soul of the city of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec world and one of the most advanced and beautiful cities in the world for its time. When even the conquistadors came over to see it, they noted the splendor and beauty of the city. In a literal sense, Tenochtitlan is a heroic spirit made of a city itself. As to why she is a female, my current running joke is that she is literally the Aztec motherland. As to how she is able to take the names of not one, but two of the most important gods of the Aztec pantheon, well, it's complicated. A city is not just made up of walls, but also people and culture. Aspects of that culture include deities, and their connection between the cities and these deities is pretty clear-cut. Tlaloc, the water god, is relevant to Tenochtitlan being a city in a lake, and Huitzilopochtli was the founder of the city itself. So, the city girl is able to take their divinities within herself and utilize them, and we see her do that for her noble phantasm. Our final pretender is Kaitku Karapriestess, or for the sake of simplicity and my mental health, Summer Bob. While this one is another instance of a servant taking on a new class through Saint Graph alteration, this one actually has a decent explanation. If you recall the plot of Lost Belt 6, Keranos had a priestess who was ripped apart to make the first humans after Keranos was poisoned to death. Later, during the events of Lost Belt 6, Bob merges with Keranos' spirit core after she herself has been ripped apart by fairies. The enshrined deity, a kind deity at that, allowed for her to merge with him. Bob and the unnamed priestess already showed parallels in the story, so during the summer, at the very least for her first ascension, we have seen her take the form of a proper priestess for the deity she'd become tied to. In essence, she's pretending to be his former priestess, which Keranos seems to delight in, given that he has accepted becoming a marketable plush for her. At the time of writing this, English resources on this particular character are limited, so details may be a bit vague, but that is the reasoning for her being a pretender that I could find from her character profile. And that's it, the Pretender class in the books. If you have additional details, feel free to let me know them down below. Check my links for my Discord, Twitch, and Twitter. Go laugh at the inevitable person who I guarantee kept a count and timestamped when I said imposter. But for now, guys, keep your chin up. Peace.